welcome again to this newest activity that we have in the research office, dubbed as an afternoon with an expert. It's been the 14th week since we actually launched this particular. May I call on our dynamic research director to deliver us the statement of purpose, Sir Mael.
Hello, everybody. Thank you so much, Jeff. This is another beautiful afternoon because we're going to discuss, we're going to share another aspect of writing a research paper. This time, this is very specific. No, it's writing an introduction as a part of a research manuscript. So later on, our expert sharer will be introduced formally by Jeff. And I am saying this to all our audiences present today, that the very purpose of this regular activity dubbed as an afternoon with an expert, primarily it is designed to give our knowledge experts in the university across campuses to share their knowledge and expertise in research. Whatever research, knowledge, or topics or subjects they would like to share, they're always welcome. So we're doing this because we believe that knowledge management or sharing of knowledge, making it explicit, is very important than making it tacit forever until our death. That is not a good knowledge management. So to give an avenue to everyone where he or she can share his or her knowledge on research. So we're conducting this regular event, again, titled An Afternoon with an Expert. So everybody is free to share. This is not a one-way communication, but this is a multifaceted communication. So if the sharer later on talks about how to write an effective introduction, then all others are free to share while they are listening to the sharing. So I think that is all for the purpose of this activity, Jeff. Thank you so much. Back to you.
Thank you, Dr. Talili. This afternoon, I am personally excited to introduce to you our speaker. He is currently a full professor and the research director of USTP Claveria campus. He has a PhD in agronomy from UP Los Baños. His research interests are the following: crop physiology, plant nutrition, farming system, and socioeconomics. Ladies and gentlemen, our speaker for this afternoon is Dr. Apolinario Gonzaga Jr. Sir Apple, the virtual floor is now yours.
Thank you, Sir Jeff. Am I audible, everyone? Madungog
Yes,
ba, Sir Jeff?
yes, Sir Paul. Loud and clear po.
Thank you po. Klaro ba ang presentation, Sir Jeff?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Visible
Makita sa
po.
screen? Okay.
Yes po.
Again, good afternoon, everyone. We are happy that despite of our busyness, we are all gathered this afternoon virtually in this activity about manuscript writing, this in particular about writing best about introduction. So as mentioned, Sir Jeff mentioned about my discipline. My apology for the rest of other participants. My good bias is towards more into experimental researches, having my degree in agronomy and soil science at UP Los Baños. But anyway, if you have some queries relative to some social or some socioeconomic survey or some researches related to that, if I have some little background on that particular aspect, I will try to answer questions and queries associated with that one. With that, ngayong hapon again, so this is the title of my presentation, Best Practices in Writing an Introduction. I hope the aspiring researchers would be more inspired and they will become more productive insofar as writing their manuscript for publication is concerned. To begin with, since our topic is all about introduction, the basic question now is, what comprises a technically sound introduction for research? Because as you might have observed, a good technical paper usually naaman na sa mga parts. So it usually start with a good title, followed by the bylines or the authors or the proponents of the study. Then subsequently, it is followed usually by a good introduction, then the results and discussion or review of literature, results and discussions, the materials and methods, the conclusion, recommendation, as well as the literature cited or the references and the acknowledgement, if ever. So let's now focus on how to make a very good introduction for possible publication in a good manuscript or journal publication. So beforehand, what does a good introduction shall offer to our readers or to us? The first is the basic function of introduction is it orient readers to the main context of the research. So meaning it give us, kung ako lang nagbasa, it will give you some perspective on what is in all the research all about. So that's the one of the basic function of a good introduction. Now it is followed by, it also discuss the research gaps and its significance. So meaning gaps that is associated with the problems or what are them to solve given your research problem in your manuscript. And then what are the corresponding works or the previous works being done? So this would entail review of literature. This will entail the works of other researchers nga nakauna sa imo or ito mga parallel researchers nga associated with your works that you are doing or are publishing about. And then there are cases that you have to state the goals, the location and time of the study conducted as part of your introduction. Now this is important because there are cases that you need to elucidate. You have to mention the locations. For example, you are running an experiment on the use of crop varieties in a specific agro-ecosystem. So in that particular sense, it is worthwhile to mention the location because what might be suited in your location in that particular study site may not be suited in other agro-ecosystem or other area of the study. So it must be expressed in the introduction part of your paper. Now, one important thing to remember about introduction is introduction does not need to be too long, but should be concise and direct to the point. Meaning, asa man dapat kataas ang maayo nga introduction. Now, if you actually browse some good journals, Scopus, ISI, or Asian Citation Index ng mga journals, usually a good introduction is about 1.5 to 2 pages, not more than 2 pages. So usually sa mga maayong introduction, sa mga maayong journal or manuscript, kasagaran 1.5 pages or 2 pages na yun na ang maayong introduction. Not too long, not too short, because in essence, you are not writing a love letter, you are writing a technical paper. So it must be, remember that ang introduction, dapat dili tayo taas, dili po anak siya kamubo. So it must be written in a way that it is concise and direct to the point or straightforward. Now, this is one good guide on how to write a good introduction. So I believe by the way, this is not mine. I have to quote this one and maybe appeal ta atong latest issue sa plagiarism. So this is not mine. I excerpted this one from the book of Ophelia Bautista et al. In 2012. The acronym as a guide is O-Pilot. So O-Pilot. So O-P-I-L-O-T. So one by one, I will discuss what is this acronym all about in making a very good introduction. So let's start with the letter O. So O stands for overview. Overview, by the way, is the one that introduces the research to the reader. It serves as the backgrounder. It serves as the backgrounder or the rationale of the study. And then, it is consists of 1 or 2 statements about the general state of the industry and or the country. So meaning, you are going to make a very good statement about the state of your research, state of what is the current status of your problem at hand. And then, it includes relevant background information only. Take note the word relevant, meaning not every information is part of the overview. Only relevant background information that is associated or germane to the study at hand. So dili kinalan nga taas kayo ang overview. 1 or 2 statements or in some cases 1 or 2 paragraphs telling us what is the study all about para mag-stop siya sa imong study as part of the introduction. So that's the overview. Here is one example. Now, this is a study conducted by Gonzaga et al. about tomato in Claveria. So this particular study would give the audience the idea that tomato is an important industry in the highlands of Claveria and Misamis Oriental. However, it is now being affected by EYLCB or locally known as Kulot. So in that particular sense, you are trying to give the reader the idea that the industry of that particular landscape, as well as the compounding problem confronting the industry. So that's the overview. Now, the next part of the whole pilot is what we call P. The P refers to the problem. Now, the problem is not the problem of the world. It is not the problem of the country. It is the problem of your manuscript. It is the problem of your thesis, of your experimental activity. So take note of that. So the problem should be very, very specific. So it is the problem you, as a researcher, who will try to solve the problem. So it is not, I repeat, it is not the problem of the problem of the world, the problem of the country, but the problem you are trying to solve within your manuscript or within your research activity. And then it is the focal point of your research, because the key question or the basic question should be answered in the problem. Now, in some journals, this is very important because some of the reader will actually focus on how you state the problem. It will gauge on how you will make your good problem so that reader will become interested in your manuscript or your published material. So it is a very important part of the introduction. So it must be expressed in clear terms. So it must be straightforward. It must be quantifiable, and it must be expressed in a very clear manner. So that's the problem. Now, here is one example of that. So in this case, a group of people from Epilos Baños is talking about the effect of Fusarium species and its impact on sugarcane. So in this case, we have elucidated the problem of confronting the sugar industry in the country. So again, the problem is customized to the problem at hand, not of the top problem of the country or problem of the world. So it must be customized to the manuscript or the problem being studied. The next part is what we call the I. The I would refer to the importance of the problem. Importance of the problem is, there are questions to be answered relative to the importance of the problem. First question is, how long has it been a problem? So, kanusara na siya nga problema. And then, why it is necessary to solve the problem? Meaning, nga naman kinahanglan nato isolbahon ang problema. So, that's importance. And then, what happens if it is not solved? Or the other question is, what will happen if the problem will not be solved? So these are some of the importance of the problem. This is what we call the importance of the problem. And there is one example. So this one is a study about the health benefits of different rice varieties. And it is studied by UP colleagues. So it illustrated in us the importance of knowing the problem. So this is one. This is one good example. Now let's proceed. The other part is the L part, literature. Now, literature, or other would say it is references or ang mga sources sa imong material. Now, references these are the findings of the authors who previously worked on the aspects related to the problem. So it is like saying, we do not need to reinvent the plow, meaning there are other people who are working on that particular problem of yours, and you need just to connect, or you need to develop, or you need to innovate, or if there are no studies, so you need to make your own one. So that's the novelty of it. So it can be established by good scouring, good amount of literature, and it includes what has been done before you started the work. So meaning you are going to scout the internet, try to research kung saan may gibuhat kini particular na field kay mga subjects and study. So that is the importance of a good literature. And you should also show to us why this particular research is conducted. This can be established through a good scout of literature. Now take note, there is some rule of the thumb relative to establishing references or literature. Now, in some cases, there are some authors who tell us that it must be at least 5 years below. Example, 2022 karon, kung mahimo 2017 or 2015. Now, that's true. However, there are cases nga dili kinahanglan nga pinaka-latest because there are cases nga you need to cite the classic references. For example, if you cite the famous study of the DNA double helix made by Clark and Watson, or the discovery of C4 photosynthesis by Hatch and Slack. So these are some of those what we call classic references. But the best thing is you need to be your literature should be of recent findings. So because science is highly dynamic, para sa una, in soil science, by the way, there is what we call water. Nagulan naman ko, nakainunong ko sa water. So in soil science, there is what they call the available water for the plants. It is what they call soil water. Now, recently, the available water now is not anymore soil water. It is now termed as grain water. And the non-available water now is what they call low water. And it has been accepted by a lot of journals. So meaning, because science is a dynamic one. One typical example also of that is the classification of Pluto as a legitimate planet before. We used to think that Pluto is part of the planetary family, but recently it is degraded into a mere stars, because science is always an evolving factor, evolving field. So that's how important literature is. Now, the next part is what they call, this is one example, by the way, of how literature is being cited. This one, several studies, and then, by the way, there are good materials on how to cite some literature. It is, if you're publishing in a good journals, you will be guided accordingly on how to make use of a good citation. So may mga format na ayaw mo kabalaka kay. You have to review the review for authors or guide for authors or guide for reviewers. So it is now available in any journals you want to publish your work. So no worries about it. It's just that you need to have a good cited material for your manuscript to be submitted in a good journal. So this is an example of that one. And the next is what they call the objective. So this is very important indeed, because as we know, objectives comes into two major forms, general as well as specific objective. So what does an objective serve? First and foremost, it tells the reader what you expect to accomplish. So that's one. Second, it usually starts with words such as evaluate, compare, characterize, determine, and establish, because these are what we call quantifiable words. So in the objectives, you have to make sure that your wordings can be measured and can be quantified. It also tells you the idea that what you did is not important in the objectives. What you did with the data is more important in the objectives. Example, you need to evaluate, so meaning you're going to do some data, the collation of data that would refer to evaluation, compare, and characterize. And the next one is, it must be at the end of your paper, it must be answered or it must be realized, because objectives, by the way, even dictates the flow of your arrangement of your materials and method. So for example, if your first objective is actually all about measuring the growth of a certain corn, for example, so the first set of discussion should be all about measuring the growth of corn or any particular commodity for that matter. So meaning it will dictate on the arrangement of your results and discussion, as well as your conclusion and recommendation, because we follow what we call the 1:1 correspondence. And then, so that's the objectives. So this is one example. For example, so this is a published material from the Philippine Crop Science Journal. So this is the objective of the study. So it is clearly elucidated that this is the objective of the study. By the way, take note that in all journals, all of the objectives are specific. So there is no need to mention that specific objectives are the following, because it would be assumed that when you publish, all of the objectives are all in specific objectives. And then the last one is what we call T, or the time and place of the study. In some cases, time and place of the study is not anymore indicated in the manuscript. Like for example, in the basic science, because it is supposed to be general. It does not, the relevance of the time and place is not established. So it is actually it depends on the type of journal that you are submitting your paper or on the type of study. So for example, if you are trying to establish the productivity of a certain species of or varieties of rice in a certain agro-ecosystem, you need to establish a time and place of study because, as mentioned, a particular landscape would give different result as opposed to the other farming areas or other landscapes. So that's in that particular sense, it is important to establish the time and place of the study. In today's world, in today's journal, it is important that you also reflect the global positioning system or the GPS coordinates, because most journal today would require the presence of these coordinates, because we can easily track in using Google Scala or use Google Map or any other GPS platform today. So that's why kasagaran sa mga journal, makita niyo mga gina-reflect na ang coordinates, north and south. These are the importance of those material. And then, in technology-based development research, because technology becomes obsolete after some time, there's really a need to reflect the time and place of the study. Because, as mentioned, science is a dynamic system. So therefore, you must reflect that this particular study is effective, perhaps in the last 2 croppings, but you are not sure it will be effective in the forthcoming season. So that is in the case of technology-based development research. So this is one example. So this is an agroforestry system published by Delgado et al. So an agroforestry system in Claveria. So these are actually published material in Scopus and ISI journals or Caribbean Analytics journals. Now, let us now review our O-pilot. So remember the word O-pilot. So this is the acronym or the guide to make a very good introduction. So the first one. The first question is, what was the research all about? So it would refer to the overview. So, and then the second one is, what was the problem? So may problema, so it would refer to your P. Then why was the work important? And what happens if the problem is not solved? So that would refer to your importance of the problem. And then the fourth, what were the findings of previous authors related to the problem or the corresponding literature or the references? So sometimes we will just interchange literature and references, but they would refer to the same thing. And then number 5 is, what did I expect to accomplish or the objectives elucidated or embedded in your manuscript? And then if it's needed by the journal or depending on the specific type of research activity, the time and place is important to be embedded in your manuscript as part of your introduction. So that's what we call the O-pilot. Now, however, those are the things you need to do to make a very good introduction. Now, I would remind everyone, what are the common don'ts for the introduction? Sa mga dili kinahanglan buhaton kung maghimo og introduction. Example, the first one is writing about the subject matter very lengthily or taas kaisanan. Because, as mentioned in introduction, you have to be concise, you need to be straightforward. So, do not write everything. Write what is relevant to the O-pilot scheme or the O-pilot guide. So, do not write lengthily about the introduction. The second one is equating the problem with the objective. So, what's the difference, by the way, between problem and the objective? The problem is the focus. The objectives are the goals used by the researcher to solve the given problem. So do not confuse the problem with the objective. So you focus on the problem and use the objectives to solve that problem embedded in your manuscript. And then having general and specific objectives. As mentioned earlier, in all journal, all objectives are specific because you cannot say the general because you can just imagine the general. So dili siya specific. So dili mo walay klaro ang resulta kung general, very broad. Unya, take note that when you submit in a certain journal, length, the space or the length, the number of pages are of the essence. So meaning that's why you focus on your specific objectives, and there is no need to mention that these are the specific objectives because it would be assumed that all of the embedded objectives are in specific manner or specific forms. And then the next one is stating the obvious, meaning how about saying the plant have seeds? Of course, it would be known that plants have seeds. And then, for example, rice is a staple food of most Filipinos. That's given, especially you're publishing in a local journal. So no need to state the obvious, or the fish are swimming in the ocean. Of course, that would be given nga ang isda mulangoy gina siya. So no need to state the obvious. So because technically, you would assume that your readers are also technical people. So there is no need to state the obvious when you do your manuscript writing in introduction. And the next is enumerate the data obtained in stating the object. So meaning, there is no need to enumerate. So for example, measuring this research aims to determine the age of crop, the length of the ears, the length of the cladodes. You can actually group the data. So for example, this data refer to vegetative growth of the plant. So this study aims to determine the vegetative growth of dragon fruit. So you need to group the data in a logical, in a very rational manner. There is no need to state the objective one by depending on the given parameter to be measured. So you need to group the data, and then you follow the grouping after the discussion part. However, these are some in doing the introduction. So let's come into for an introduction written, published in a journal in Nipilos Baños about sweet potato or kamote. So let's browse this one. So the first one, the overview with literature. Second one is your problem with literature and the rest. And it is also the problem and the importance and the objectives and the time and place of the study. So all in all, it actually follows what they call the O-pilot scheme in the introduction part. So I hope I share. You just follow the O-pilot or O-pilot guide. So O would refer to your, P would refer to your problem, I or references, and in the objectives. And if there is a need to mention the time and place of the study, depending on the journal, so please do it. With that, I shared something relevant and important. Maayong hapon, o I am very willing to request for any questions or some queries or some anything about the given topic. Maayong hapon and good day sa lahat. Thank you po.
Wow, ang galing-galing naman ni Sir Apple. So thank you, Sir Apple, for that inspiring talk, for giving us an in-depth, detailed, comprehensive lecture on writing good introduction as a part of the research manuscript. At this point in time, let us continue the discussion through having this knowledge sharing portion of time. We shall welcome some clarificatory questions, yes, from any of the participants in the virtual room. Shall we begin with Dr. Talili, our research director, Sir ISMAEL?
Hello, thank you so much, Jeff. First of all, I'd like to extend my gratitude to Dr. Gonzaga, Sir Apple, for that very interesting presentation on how to write an effective introduction as a part of a research manuscript. So apparently, it was very clear. It's a very clear guide for researchers, especially the neophytes, even our students present today or this afternoon, that will help them a lot because the tips given by Sir Apple are very clear, very organized, and there is no reason why a beginner researcher or a student cannot finish or complete an introduction. So I just would like to underpin, Jeff, what Sir Apple mentioned earlier, that the introduction is very important. It's really very important as a part of the research manuscript. If we call the title as the show window of the paper, the introduction is the eye of the paper. This is where we can put on the background of the paper, what it is all about, what problem is being dealt with, and all others are found in the introduction. So almost everything about the paper So what is nice in the presentation, Jeff, is Dr. Gonzaga was able to present in an acronym format, the O pilot. I hope everybody has heard of this. This is very common actually from the material of Bautista et al. That was published in 2012. I just would like to add something, Jeff. No, in this case, no, apparently Dr. Gonzaga recommended to have the order of the parts, the O, the PILOT in this order. So we write first the overview, followed by the problem, then the importance of the problem, then the literature, and the objectives, and the time and place of study. So I just would like to add something, Jeff, to further strengthen the illustration. In the overview aspect, I like that not to be the first part of the introduction. That is what I said many times to our fellow researchers, even our students, that the best way to start your introduction is to define the key variable or the key concept, giving an idea to your audience, what are you writing, what are you investigating. So it's very important to define the concept, the key concept of your paper. And then followed by a global situational analysis, okay, just to give the readers an overview, an analysis, situational analysis of the key concept or problem from the global perspective, and then down to local perspective, or we call that one the local situational analysis. And followed by the P, the problem, and followed also by I, the importance of the problem. I like what Dr. Gonzaga stressed, not just writing or stating why is it important to solve the problem, but it's very important also to give a space in the introduction, what will happen if the problem will not be solved, okay? I think that is one interesting question for you to address in your introduction. And then number 4 is L, literature. Now, these are findings of related studies. So Dr. Gonzaga, Jeff, made mention of accommodating readings published 5 years back. Now, except for, of course, there are studies which are historical in nature. So we cannot actually make that as a fixed or default when we write the literature review as part of the introduction. So in general, many scholars or even scientists recommend to avoid Jurassic sources of information, the old literature. But again, we cannot avoid that, especially if we write historical research. There are times when we need to trace the history of a phenomenon. So we need to bite on, or we need to use old literature, not necessarily 5 years back. And then the fifth one, I'd like to suggest the fifth one should be T, or what Dr. Gonzaga, based on his reference, stands for time and place of study. This is actually what we call the context. Okay? Just to make it clear, basin og abi sa ato ang mga estudyante, time and place of study, basin og ibutang nila 1 p.m. in the afternoon. Okay, Mambuaya, Cagayan de Oro City. Okay, what Dr. Gonzaga meant by time and place is actually the context. The context, that the time could be the season of the year, okay, or it could be the place where the study was conducted. So in one word, we call that one the context. Okay, that is my suggestion. That should be number 5. So we start with overview, problem, importance of the problem or study, literature, and then the T, time and place of study or the context. And my suggestion for number 6 is the objectives. So objectives should be the end, the last, so that the readers would know easily that these are the things that the researcher was doing in the study. And I would like to add one very important, Jeff, just to add to the acronym, because This is actually what is usually missed out by our researchers, even our students in the undergrad and grad. You know, in the graduate level, specifically in the master's level, the very reason why the paper is called thesis, because it is expected that in the introduction, no, the last part of the introduction should be the thesis statement. Okay, what is that statement all about? That statement apparently states your belief, okay, your stand of the problem at hand, no, the assumption. What do you believe? What is your stand? What do you assume? Okay, if this is now the global situational analysis, if this is now the local situational analysis, if these are the findings of the authors of the previous studies, what then is your stand? What then is your assumption? So I would like that be the last part of the introduction for the readers to know what do you believe. Because, you know, the very reason why we do research is we have our stand, we have our position. Okay? Maman ang hinungdan mo makandak ta og research aside from validating the theoretical assumptions. One of the very reasons why we do research is to make our own position on the problem or matter at hand. So to me, that is very important to be stated the last part of your intro. And I would like to commend Dr. Gonzaga for sharing the don'ts in writing the introduction. And I'm confident and sure, Jeff, those things, those tips will help a lot, especially to our neophytes researchers and even to our students. Thank you so much, Jeff.
Thank you, Dr. Talili. Shall we have a response from Sir Apple as regards to what Dr. Talili has
Yes, sir.
stated a while ago?
Sir Jeff.
Yes po, sir.
Okay, thank you po. Yeah, no problem with the suggestion. Again, brilliant idea, Dr. Talili. I agree with that one. As mentioned, kining time is sometimes optional siya depending on the journal to submit or depending on the prevailing situation. In some cases, kinilag yung objectives. This is your thesis in your particular manuscript. So I agree with that one. And in addition, Sir Jeff, can we answer some queries in the chat box?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So,
Ako lang muna. Sorry,
Sir
Jeff,
Eman Galieto has
daghang kayo siya
stated
pumutana
here
sa sir.
that nagdaghan siya. So
Oh, yeah.
first is this. What is the standard paper size of any research manuscripts? Is it letter, legal, A4 size?
Actually,
Okay.
walay standard ani Sir Galieto. It depends now on the unang-una. It depends on the journal you submit. But most journals would have A4 or journal nga letters short na legal. It depends. So the best thing to do is to, before submission, you have to read the guide to authors. It comes to submission. In some cases, for example, kung kanang sa proposal pa bitaw, kung sa Pilipinas nga situation, insofar as Philippines, labi na sa gobyerno, most of our papers are karong ginagamit for submissions are in A4 kung sa gobyerno. But in journal, kung sa journal, walay standard kung unsa nga legal, short pa siya o A4. It always depend on the journal to be submitted. Ang pinaka-safe nga kuan is kaning standard margin, usually 3 cm, usually ang ako nakita kasagaran sa mga journal nga kanang mga journal available online, 3 cm between sides, left and right, when I say common. Again, it depends on the journal. Napa na siya sa guide to authors. Font and size, usually the usually accepted font is so far still Times New Romans, Calibri, and Arial, and usually 11 or 12. And there are cases nga 14 ang font size sa title. All other text could be 11 or 12. So nana siya. And then standard line, there are journals nga 2 spaces. There are journals nga 1.5 ang yung spacing required. And then kining thesis, research papers, depende ni siya sa institution. Kaya mga institution nga ang ilang standard kay single spacing, na po institution nga double space, na po institution nga 1.5. So it now depends on specific institution. So all in all, wala gid siya one size fit all. Depende siya sa journal nga imong submitan, depende po sa kung thesis siya, depende sa institution nga imong i-submit ng imong manuscript. I hope it helps, Mr. Sir Galieto.
Sir
By the
Apple,
way, Sir Jeff, we have also
Yes.
nabanay ang mga mananaway gikan sa Camiguin Polytechnic State College.
Yes po.
We have Dr. Shabuk,
Lena
the
Shabuk.
Vice President sa
Vice President.
CPSC. Ma'am, may hapon.
Yes.
Sir Jeff,
Dr. Shabuk is actually one of our resident research proposal evaluators po, Dr. Apple. Yes po, Dr. Talili.
yeah, I just would like, good afternoon, everyone, again. I just would like to do a rejoinder, Jeff, to what Sir Apple mentioned earlier, in relation also to the questions of Emmanuel. So thank you so much, Emmanuel. Actually, Emmanuel was my graduate student the previous semester. So, yeah, Sir Apple is right. These things actually depend on the journal. No, it matters. It differs from journal to journal. So I think the question should not be on standard paper size, okay? Because it's not actually a concern of the author, of the researcher. What is the concern of the author is really the number of words. The number of words or the length of the manuscript that you should write, okay? So it is not actually a concern as to the paper size, because at the end of the day, the paper size is a concern of the publisher, which differs from journal to journal. So Sir Apple is right. No one size fits all, because it differs from journal to journal. And as an author, we should always follow the author guide dispensed by the journal you are submitting, or to whom the paper will be submitted and to be reviewed by the reviewers and editors. So again, not an issue on the paper size, but the author, Jeff, should mind the number of words, the length of the paper, because I am pretty sure that is one of the things, one of the requirements that the journal is dispensing as a matter of requirement that the author should comply. Okay, thank you.
Okay, so thank you, Dr. Talili and Dr. Apple. Shall we have our students? Okay, Edna, let's have Edna first. Yes, Eds.
Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, Sir Gonzaga. I am Edna Paner from USTP CDO. We all know, sir, that making a good research starts with catchy introduction that makes the reader read the whole research po, which we have the guidelines for this. But what my question, sir, is what if those guidelines in writing an introduction is not complete? Will it still be a good introduction, except with the place and time, sir, since it's optional po?
Thank you. Can I answer?
Yes, Sir Paul.
That is a quite interesting question, Ma'am Edna. Yes, there are cases that dili gid mabuo ang katong O-pilot nga acronym, but it's no problem. So for example, as mentioned, katong imong T nga kuan or the time and place of the study is something optional. However, if possible, you really need to somehow comply with the acronym O-pilot. By the way, pag may O-pilot, dili kinahanglan nga ang the first kid kay diretso dayon ang nadi ka magbutang o kanang review oblet. It is just an acronym wherein it should be embedded. Posible lang nga, it could be first paragraph. You can actually embed the appropriate cited. If that's the case, I cannot say that you will have a very good introduction, but ang bukod mo kuning introduction, kailangan kung mahimo, siya, I believe in you, nga kasi dapat. Pero in as much as possible, all of those elements must be captured in the introduction. So, kung mahimo lang ito siya para nga murag ma-convey nato nga to convey the readers to really read the whole manuscript or murag ma-interest nasa sense of interest ba. So may insight nimo siya nga imo siyang basahon kung maayo ang pagkahimo sa imong introduction because usually ang mo man ay di man maka-embed imong problem ang imong statement of the plan as well as the local of the study. So kung mahimo lang unta, you need to really incite the reader to consume or to read wholly the whole introduction and after the whole paper possible. So but if case dili gid siya, you need to be creative in writing your manuscript. Kung dili gid siya fully complied ang imong katong imong overview. Ang overview, you can always do that. I believe the problem is part of the introduction. The importance of the literature cited because lahi man paminaw ng introduction nga way let wala man siya typical, di ba? So any material nga wala review of let wala siya gray material, even gray materials, some of them would cite using a good review material. So dapat naagi siya literature cited. And then objectives, as mentioned by Dr. Talili, ang objectives diya mabutang imong thesis, ang imong bang question mark, your hypothesis. So I think those can be easily satisfied in the introduction. But again, ang pinaka do not write a pages at most my introduction. I think that would be enough. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
All right, so thank you, Sir Apple. Shall we have Miss Jeannie? Yes, Miss Jean.
Yes, sir. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Jenny Yana from TCM1K4, and I have a question, sir. Should you have questions in a introduction? I mean, is putting a question in the introduction appropriate or a good research?
Hello, Jeff.
Yes, sir. Loud and clear po.
Sorry na, murag ulan-ulan mo ko diyan sa Claveria, medyo binuwang signal. But anyway, yeah, in some Ma'am Jen, naay mga introduction nga I've read in some journals nga naay mga question mark embedded in the introduction. So it is allowed. But it depends on the journal and it also depends on the reviewer of your submitted manuscript. In some cases, in some journals, they are allowing the use of question mark in some cases. But it depends on the journals. I cannot say yes or no, but I've seen a lot of journals nga they are allowing the use of question mark being embedded or incorporated in the introduction. So it's a yes, actually. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you, Sir Paul. Okay, she's actually opening his camera. Okay, shall we hear from Dr. Nena Shabu? Maybe she has something to share with us this afternoon. Any add-on ideas from the topic? Doc Nen?
Hello, sir. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon po, Doc Nen.
Wala
Yes
na,
po.
sir. The presentation is very clear.
So
Okay,
thank you
sir.
po, Doc Nen.
Thank you,
How
Sir
about the
Apple, for
others?
that nice presentation.
Maybe we can hear from
Hello, Sir
Dr.
Jeff.
Saniel. Yes po, Sir Apple.
Sorry, gagawin internet. Naipangutana si Ma'am Nina.
Wala na daw po na, sir.
Biko ba
Wala, Sir Apple. Wala. Klaro kay sir.
Okay, I received from one question from USTP Roqueta. So it says here, is there any specific tense of verbs to be used in the introduction? And then is there any specifics in terms of lengths of paragraphs or pages in the introduction? Yes po, Sir Paul.
Thank you, Jeff. Actually, that in the guide to authors, in most journals, there are na mga kuan ba, na mga protocol unsay. Pero usually in the introduction, the usual verb is present type, and then of course in the introduction and the objectives you can use a little past tense, but most journals would require the present tense of the verb. However, the pinaka-best gid ana nga kuan is to refer to the guide to authors. Kaya na sila yung mga pros and do's and don'ts pag-abot sa use of verb, the use of citation, so on and so forth. So you please refer to the guide to authors when you submit your manuscript to a certain journal. Thank you.
Jeffrey, can I do a rejoinder?
Yes, Sir Mael.
Yeah, so again, we always go back to the author guide, not to the protocol dispensed by the journal. But in general, when you state fact, no, it's a statement of fact. We use the present tense of the verb. No, for habitual action, that's present tense of the verb. However, I noticed, no, as a reviewer, I noticed that many journals require authors to use past, no, simple past tense of the verb when we refer to previous studies, findings of previous studies. For example, Gonzaga 2022 found that, okay, not Gonzaga 2022 finds that, no, it's in a past tense of the verb. So that is what usually happens. But again, I'd like to strengthen what Dr. Gonzaga mentioned. We always follow the author guide. Thank you.
So thank you, Dr. Talili and Dr. Gonzaga. Dr. Gonzaga, I have one question here.
Thank
In
you,
the
Jeff.
introduction, what should be the best portion in there where we can best put the originality component of the study?
The novelty type.
Yes.
Okay. I think you can put that to me kung ako ang pabuhat o kuan na Jeff nga nakay novel nga kuan. I put that before the objectives. Para nga morag because in the objectives you need to state the question or the thesis. So before that one you put the novelty part.
Okay. So thank you, Dr. Gonzaga.
Thank you.
I think wala na yung nag-ask questions. So we can now award this certificate of recognition to our speaker. May I request Christian to share with us? Sir Chris? All right, so this certificate of recognition is awarded to Dr. Apolinario Gonzaga Jr., our sharer for this afternoon, who just talked about this particular topic, best practices in writing introduction, signed by our university president, Dr. Ambrosio de Cultura II, this day, July 15, 2020. So congratulations for Dr. Apol.
Thank you, Sir Jeff. And if I may,
Yes,
salamat
po.
sa opportunity, Sir Mael and Sir Jeff and the rest of the USTP family. Actually, naapot tayo mga kailag ikan sa Bohol, students from Pangantukan Community College in Bukidnon and from, I believe, from Zamboanga. So at least we have also nakashare po sa ILAS the importance of making a good introduction. With that, mayong hapon o daghang salamat, Sir Mael. God bless po sa atin.
Jeff, I would like to take
Yes,
this opportunity to thank personally to our sharer, Dr. Gonzaga, Sir Apple. Thank you so much for your time. This is a great privilege for all of us. And I'm so happy, Jeff, that as mentioned, we have here listeners or participants from other colleges or universities. I hope we can have many participants in the next week, in the afternoon with an expert. And this is just a reminder to our participants this afternoon to please apply what Dr. Gonzaga has shared earlier, and let us continue to leverage our commitment to research and innovation. Thank you so much, Jeff.